Hello and welcome to the ICT Pulse podcast. I'm Michelle Marius, your host and the editor and publisher of ICT Pulse, the online platform where we discuss ICT issues from a Caribbean perspective. Today we are thrilled to have Teresa Wankin, the Secretary General of CANTO, the Caribbean Association of National Telecommunications Organizations. The association represents the needs and interests of operators, organizations, companies, and individuals in the telecommunications and ICT sector. So the position CANTO and its members take on telecoms and ICT issues can have an impact on consumers across the Caribbean region. In speaking with Teresa, we'll be discussing and in some instances clarifying the views and position of CANTO and its members on matters such as net neutrality and OTT over-the-top services. We'll also be talking about disaster risk management and infrastructure resiliency and the future of telecoms in the region. Teresa, welcome.
Thank you, Michelle. Happy to be here.
So, Teresa, before we discuss CANTO's position on specific telecoms and ICT issues, can you give us some insight into how CANTO develops and adopts its policy position on important issues?
Okay, so Michelle, at CANTO, we develop and adopt policy positions by mainly consultation and collaboration. We work closely with our members and independently with our board of directors to identify issues facing the region and the globe. It is common knowledge that in the ICT world, no issue is strictly local without some regional or global impact. I mean, if we were to look at some of the issues that we deal with on a daily basis, like cybersecurity, OTTs, even GDPR, all these are global issues with local impact. A lot of our work in this area is done by utilizing the various working committees of the board of CANTO. We have 7 working committees made up of experts in the various fields, and they make recommendations to the Secretariat after dialogue with all stakeholders. I just want to say here that we at CANTO or the entire region have some of the best talent in the world. And what CANTO does is we harness this talent and skill set to assist us in the various disciplines. We always joke that any issue the region face, we have a committee that we can represent that issue. It's true. We also work closely with agencies such as CTU, ITU, IDB, ICANN, and the Internet Society, sometimes just to deliberate and comment on important policy decisions. These associations, they benefit from our work, and of course, we benefit from their work. Once our recommendation is arrived at through our working committees and the various consultations, the CANTO Board of Directors then decides on adopting or adjusting our policies. And as I said before, this collaborative process helps us to ensure that we address, the right issues and dialogue on the full perspective of an issue before we choose to adopt it or adjust it. Collaboration is key to the process as it helps us to ensure that we address the right issues and dialogue on the full perspective of an issue before we choose to adopt or adjust.
Absolutely. So a question, because one of the things that came to mind is that sometimes I would expect that with an issue that is confronting your members, especially like your telecoms operators and service providers, the larger ones may have the resources to do the research and to understand the implications from both sides. How useful has been the effort that CANTO goes through to investigate issues and come up with a position in terms of informing the members as to the pros and cons? Because I think sometimes, as people, we are all human. We can have this emotional response to an issue, but when confronted by whatever the facts are and the pros and cons, we may find that we need to adjust our position.
Of course. And that's why we have constant dialogue. CANTO boasts that our strength lies in our diversity. So if you look at our membership, Michelle, you will see very small operators and very large pan-Caribbean operators. And we use this diversity to ensure that when we address an issue, it is not just for one specific large operator or a small operator. We have consensus from inception to decision. So when we send a matter to one of our committees, we have various stakeholders represented on that committee. And if we have to bring in experts to help us with an issue, we do it because we do it for our members, and the region, the development of the region.
Excellent. All right, so let's just move on and start to at least get some clarity on some of the issues. I guess one of those that has been subject to long-standing debate, where telecoms operators, policymakers, and the public at large seem to have different opinion, is with respect to net neutrality. We know that regulators and policymakers tend to support the continuation of net neutrality, essentially that, there should be equitable access to all internet content regardless of source and without favoring or blocking particular products or websites. But a few telecoms firms have been quite vocal in their opposition to that policy. What is CANTO's view?
Following from what we just spoke about on consensus, collaboration, and deliberations, net neutrality issues, we have a code of conduct. We've reviewed net neutrality in CANTO. We have several iterations of our deliberations. And it's a matter of importance to our members and our region. And I will tell you why I think it's important. Most of our CANTO members are island states, and all are small economies on a global scale with limited resources. Access by our peoples to information is therefore key for us to enable our development and growth. We have adopted at CANTO a code of conduct, and when I say we, I mean all of our members, the larger members and the smaller members. This code, as we call it, it seeks to provide a framework for operators across the region to collectively address the issue on net neutrality. I must also mention, Michelle, that what the code does, it looks to the perspective of the consumer's rights, because several forums that you will attend will talk about the consumer's rights. But when we developed the code on net neutrality, we looked at consumers' rights in accessing lawful content and applications over the internet.
Yes.
I must also mention that the code seeks to balance this need, the need for freedom for the end users or the consumers and content providers. The code also needs to balance it with the requirements of operators to run their networks while innovating and developing new services and business models. If you look on our website, you will see the code, and the code goes on to state, and I will read a quote from the code for you. CANTO and its members support the concept of the open internet and the general principle that legal content, applications, and services should not be blocked. As you know, CANTO members are all signatories to the code and has committed to obey the guidelines in the code. What we view the code as, Michelle, is as a best practice, right? So far, this is working well in the member countries, especially in countries where we have competition. And what this shows is that businesses will adhere or stick to best practices. I mean, in any industry, there are the businesses who will stick to best practices. Mm-hmm. And it also hints that moderate regulations are also options worth considering.
Yes. All right. So let's just also move on now to talk about over-the-top services, which generally are services provided over the internet which bypass traditional distribution. So popular examples would include WhatsApp and Skype, which in some instances have replaced, us using SMS messaging services with our local operators or making local and even international telephone calls. So again, some telecoms firms have been quite vocal that OTT service providers should not be allowed to provide those services to their customers for free. But Caribbean government seem to be of a contrary view, since no definitive measures have been taken to change the status quo. What has been CANTO's view on this issue?
I smile. I smile before I answer. In August 2017, CANTO responded to a paper by the ITU on public policy considerations for OTTs. In brief, what we've done is reiterated our view that telecommunication regulations should apply to all or none, be they regulations related to regulation of the industry or regulations related to taxation. We have done this for the simple reason that Caribbean networks carry the cost of regulations which OTTs providers do not. They also do not pay taxes in our jurisdiction. And where is the beef here, right? If you look at OTTs, from CANTO's perspective, it is our view that OTTs are being subsidized by not only Caribbean operators, by governments and consumers, because they do not pay any compensation for the networks that they use. Right? It is a known fact that the taxes operators are paying to governments in the regions are being reduced drastically in some cases. OTTs, they simply provide a service. They are a business. And once they operate in a jurisdiction where businesses are being taxed, then they need to be taxed. In the same vein, if they operate in a jurisdiction where businesses are regulated, then OTTs need to be regulated. And that's all we are saying, Michelle. This is not only an operator problem. It's an operator problem, it's a government problem, and it's a consumer or a citizen problem. And it's very easy to see one side of the coin, where it is very easy for you to get free access. I mean, all of us use it. All of us use free access. But the larger question, or the deeper question we need to ask ourselves, is that access really free, right? And there are debates that you can go on and on. But what I said is what sums up CANTO's position on OTTs. We embrace OTTs, and we have started to negotiate with OTTs. At our last event in Panama, we had Facebook, we had Google. We are also trying to get people like Netflix and other content providers and OTT operators to come to the region. But all we are simply saying is we want to play fairly in this game.
So what was the reception and position like for some of these major providers that you all had at your meeting in July?
Oh, the reception was very well, because it's the first time we got them to come and speak at our event. And their topics were very good. One of the things CANTO always pride ourselves with is that once the environment is conducive to do business, we will do business. Our members will do business. We'll find innovation, we'll find innovative ways, and we'll change our business models. But we want it to be fair. These companies like Facebook and Google, I think they've started to talk to us, and that is a big win for the region. Not only for CANTO members, but for the region. They aren't going anywhere, and we aren't going anywhere. So we need to sit and we need to talk. So the dialogue has started, and we welcome that. And we look forward to having them at more events and even deepening the conversations that we have with them.
And I think there may be some trends that are happening across, well, not necessarily the region, but globally, whereby the some of these companies are being, held to task for the impact of their business. It can no longer be about, just making monies and without any responsibility recognizing the impact that they have. So there may be some sort of paradigm shift that is happening whereby even if the focus in currently may not necessarily be the area of OTT and the impact on local infrastructure that delivers their services, but I can see though that there may be changes that might come just because companies now need to be more responsible and recognize their responsibility, within, I guess, the global construct that currently exists.
And that's welcome. That's welcome. We welcome that.
Okay, so since you mentioned the conference in July, I wanted to find out about the keynote speaker, which was Ajit Pai, the chairman of the FCC, who was at the 2018 annual conference and trade exhibition that CANTO has. Were there any useful takeaways to the region that you can share from his talk?
Yes, there are several, I think. I think one of the key takeaway from Chairman Pai address to our delegates at the conference is his point on the commonality of our situations, the Caribbean countries and the U.S. nation. Very often when we think of the U.S., we think of the metropolitan countries like LA, New York, Miami, but it is so much more diverse than that. Many of these other communities in the U.S. share the same challenges of connectivity and the urgent need for information access for both economic and social development. And when I say we share that common need, the rural areas in the U.S. are just like the rural areas in our region.
Yes.
But that's just one of the commonality that we can identify. His examples, he gave several examples of his travels throughout the U.S., which highlighted that commonality and that similarity. He also showed and highlighted through his talks how technology can bring benefits to these rural areas, not only with access, but for improving the lives in agriculture, healthcare, improving the lives of the citizens. And all of this is very, very relevant to our region. In addition, what he spoke about collaboration, the need for collaboration, and above all, he also spoke about a lot of work to be done still in his region and in our region to bridge the digital divide. I could identify with these things, not only myself, but CANTO could identify with these. Our members operate in countries where we still have a lot to do to bring access to all in rural areas and remote areas. What did Chairman Pai also spoke about working closely with his Caribbean neighbors, Michelle, and I think that's a good start.
No, absolutely. So did you get a sense as to how that could work? Because, I mean, it's all well and good that we, these are nice words to say when you have, hundreds of delegates sitting down, eagerly waiting to hear what you have to say, but whether or not that can be put into action.
Yes, you're right. The FCC operates from the U.S. perspective, and several people at the conference asked me why we chose Chairman Pai to come to the event when he's not even a Caribbean regulator. But 80% or even 90% of the service providers to the Caribbean region reside or have some sort of business in the U.S.
Yes.
So all of the U.S. policies affect us indirectly. Working together also to shape these policies, I think we could benefit from the US, and we could benefit especially from the technologies that they may be quicker to adopt. And our learning curves could be shorter because of this. How we will work together, specifically with the FCC, I can't say. It's early days still. We still have to sit down and develop a roadmap for this.
Yes.
But the sharing of knowledge is one of the things I can think of from the top of my head. Best practices and stuff like that. Just things like these are quick wins where we can learn from them. How they did it, what went right, what went wrong, what we should not do. Sometimes there's merit in being adopters and not leaders because we don't have to make the same mistakes that they are making.
Oh, definitely. So I guess recognizing and just going back to just a point about the infrastructure in the US and certainly here in the Caribbean in some areas is not as developed as it should be. I wanted to just touch on the whole thrust towards establishing community networks for areas that might be underserved by existing, telecoms operators and service providers. And it's something that is being, proposed in the region where the infrastructure in some communities might not be as robust, or the communities can be seriously isolated, especially after a storm or other disaster. So does CANTO support the move towards establishing community networks within the region?
Community networks as an internet society initiative, or community networks as the government seeking to build and manage their own networks. I guess you're
The
talking about
former.
internet society.
Yes, I mean it's more about
Yes.
underserved communities as opposed to government
Okay.
networks, and whether I guess there may be some link between the two, where the government might support community networks in isolated communities, but to a considerable degree, at least certainly this year or from last year, it is being driven by internet society.
Yes. So we are currently in discussions with Internet Society to collaborate on this initiative in the region. We have a memorandum of understanding in place with Internet Society to work on common projects, initiative, capacity building, awareness promoting in the region. We have delivered our first regional workshop on community networks at the conference in Panama. And from the feedback I have received so far, the interest in the region is great. CANTO share a common view with like-minded agencies to make the internet available to everyone. And we see this as an opportunity to collaborate with, in this case, Internet Society to provide access to unserved and also to increase access in underserved areas. Of course, reducing and eradicating the connectivity gap in urban, rural, and remote areas remain an issue that we are passionate about at CANTO. It is also, Michelle, an issue, I must say, that needs collaboration by all stakeholders. And we, from our perspective, we are happy to be part of it.
Well, I'm glad, because one of my concerns, as much as many of the community networks initially tend to be conceptualized as just bringing some modicum of connectivity to a community, sometimes what may not be often clear is whether or not, or the extent to which it connects back to the larger telecommunications infrastructure, such as to be able to provide internet service to that community in particular. So I'm glad that at least CANTO and I guess by extension its members seem quite open to it. And it may be an area though that might require, some policy guidance, I suspect, from countries, as well as, I don't think necessarily to say regulation, meaning that it needs to be overly controlled, but probably to give some sort of oversight and ensure that those sorts of networks have some, I guess, common basis and structure to them.
Yes, I agree with you, Michelle, because most of the countries would have had some form of distance learning. I mean, in Jamaica, you all had it. In Trinidad, we had it. Distance learning for community networks. What my view of this new iteration of community networks is a revamping and a value add to those older networks that weren't very, what I should say, you have to help me here, but I don't want to say anything bad about the initiative, because at the time, with the tools that we had, that's what we could have done.
Mm-hmm.
But those networks now, even today, to me, I don't find they are adding value to the communities. I'm from a rural community, so I'm always passionate about things like this.
Yes.
And I think if be it CANTO members, the Internet Society of Government, anybody who invests in a network, it must be able to add value and improve the lives of the citizens in these remote areas. And that's why when Internet Society approached us, we wanted to hear about the project and we wanted to learn and see ways where we can add value to the project and ensure that the objective of the project is not lost.
Definitely. I guess we'll have to stay tuned then and see how it unfolds.
Yes. We will continue our discussions with them, with Internet Society. As I said, we have a memorandum of understanding and we work closely with them. So we'll definitely get involved in some way and help promote the initiative.
Excellent. It now brings me to the whole issue of disaster risk management and infrastructure resiliency, because oftentimes it is these isolated communities, the ones that are probably underserved or have little or no infrastructure, telecommunications infrastructure, that really feel the brunt of the hurricanes that we tend to experience within the region on a fairly regular basis. And I'm sure that last year's hurricane season, which we had quite a few major hurricanes pass through the region, really probably brought the whole issue of disaster risk management and infrastructure resiliency to the fore at CANTO. So can you give us a sense of CANTO and its members' views on those issues, and whether there has been any commitment or resolution that in some way would try to address the region's vulnerability in that regard?
So, Michelle, we live in communities that are highly vulnerable to natural disasters. So, CANTO keeping a constant focus on disaster risk management and infrastructure resiliency is like one of the core things we do. And our commitment to this is highlighted by our various activities that we are involved in throughout the region. We have a disaster preparedness committee or a disaster risk management committee. And they have championed this cause not only in recent time, but from the inception of CANTO, and have done a remarkable job in supporting the work of the region on disaster preparedness and mitigation. What we do, and I would just talk about a couple of the things that we do, because the committee, as I said, this committee is a long-standing committee of CANTO. I came to CANTO and met this committee in operation. We, together with the committee and other stakeholders, have done several things to improve capacity building in this discipline and other areas. What we do, some of the things that we do on an annual basis, I'll go there first and then we'll talk about like once-off initiative. So at every event CANTO has had in the past couple of years, and this goes back before that horrendous hurricane season last year, we have workshops on disaster risk management. So in our annual conference, we would have a workshop or a session. We also have public awareness and training workshops specific to disaster risk management and business continuity. Over the past 5 years, we've trained over 80 persons in business continuity. And when I say trained, I don't mean just a workshop or just a seminar. Certified business continuity professionals. So that for human capacity building in the region is phenomenal. We also conduct yearly simulation exercises and public awareness campaigns throughout the region. We do this with CDEMO. We work closely with CDEMO. We are about to sign a memorandum of understanding with them. We also work with the ITU and GSMA on a global and regional perspective. Just if we turn our attention to 2017, Michelle, 6 of our member companies were devastated by Irma or Maria or both in some cases.
Yep.
When I say that, I would not have to go into a full detail of what happens in CANTO where disaster preparedness is concerned. What I must highlight for you though is that even though several of our networks were down after the hurricane, as soon as these networks were up and internet access was available, regardless of which member company had access first, what they did was turn to the community and ensure that they were sharing internet access to the various communities. They opened up their offices where they could have, and they let members of the public come and send messages to their loved ones for 5 minutes, sometimes 10 minutes, as the power and access would allow. So that's just a CSR plug in there.
Yes.
So, in addition to those kinds of community spirit initiatives in the aftermath of disaster, we've also been providing volunteers to CDEMA and to help and assist them in their assessment phase. After Hurricanes Irma and Maria, we came together with CDEMA and provided volunteers from our membership to accompany them to the islands.
Yes.
After to ensure that the assessment was done properly for insurance purposes and also for rebuilding efforts. We've also recently collaborated on a publication by the United Nations Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean. We know them as ECLAC. The title of the publication is Strengthening Cooperation Between Telecommunication Operators and National Disaster Offices in the Caribbean. What the publication did was examine the needs and limitations facing the region and also identify the roles and activities for mitigation, preparation, and post-disaster response and recovery. This publication was shared with all stakeholders in the region, government, regulators, of course, industry and service providers. We also have an annual hackathon where our youths have developed a Sonar mobile application. I'm not sure, you must have heard of the Sonar mobile application. What it is essentially, it innovates social communication, disaster management, and recovery efforts. The application is now in its testing phase, and quite a few countries have signed on for testing.
Oh, excellent.
To sum this up, Michelle, I guess what you are really asking is how CANTO members operate in an increasingly global and digital business environment. We also operate in a hurricane-prone region.
Yes, we do.
But disaster risk management and infrastructure resiliency is critical to the success of our companies. Our commitment to build resilient network is not just part of a contingency planner. It is part of the core of our sustainability. So any member country or company that CANTO has would have a disaster preparedness plan, a full disaster preparedness plan where network resiliency is a very, very critical issue.
Understood. And actually, there's just a little offshoot I wanted to ask, just based on how central this issue is. Are all of the operators in the region members of CANTO, or most of them?
I think about 98% of the operators are members of CANTO. Of course, we may have operators starting to do business who are not yet members of CANTO, but will soon become members of CANTO.
Understood. And I think just for my last question, and probably looking at all that we have spoken about and trying to end on a more positive note, I'm just thinking, as you rightfully said, we operate in a global environment, regardless of how local we are, and even looking at a regional perspective. And I noted that for Canto's upcoming AGM, which is in January next year, the theme will be transitioning to a digital region, opportunities and threats. And I'm thinking, well, haven't we not been trying to transition to a digital region? So what I want to probably ask is, what was the impetus for choosing such a theme, and what do you think a digital region should look like?
So digital transformation, yes, we've been talking about it for quite some time, and it has the potential to significantly improve our lives and create so many societal good. It also provides new opportunities and value creation. However, Michelle, many countries have yet to experience the full benefits of digital transformation. And I'll just name a few of these benefits: inclusive and sustainable growth, improved governance, and responsible service delivery. For our region to benefit from digital transformation, there must be a common platform driven by vision, leadership, innovation, and even partnership among governments, businesses, and civil society. This can only be accomplished if we work together with all these stakeholders to adopt faster and reap greater benefits. We view our role in CANTO in providing a platform for this development to ensure that we have a robust ICT ecosystem. We must have a common platform for dialogue, deliberations, collaborations. We know that the telecommunications industry is at the forefront of this transformation. As an industry, we focus on the social and economic development of the countries in the region, and it is imperative that we bring the issues, the challenges, and more importantly, the opportunities for overcoming all of these challenges and issues to the forefront. So to answer your question, this theme was chosen with this in mind, knowing that CANTO, as the premier forum for bringing all of the stakeholders together, is well placed to do so. I mean, if you come to any one of our conferences, you will see regulators, policymakers, vendors, service providers, all of the industry experts, and of course citizens at the event. Where can you find all of these stakeholders under one roof? It's the only place that this discussion can be holistic and can really move the region forward if we are going to do it on a collaborative and global space. What would I think a digital region
Should
will
look
look
like.
like? A harmonized and innovative region. To me, Michelle, to put this in my perspective, and this is my perspective now, a digital region means that all, and I say all government services, first and foremost, must be available online and to all citizens, regardless of socio-economic or geographical location. Because I'm from a rural community, a digital region must facilitate rural students and citizens having the same access to information and education as urban citizens and students. A digital region, to me, must have more e-commerce platforms and enable us to expand our markets beyond just country and nation borders, regional borders. Our people must not simply be users of the technology, accepting information, especially information and technologies like OTTs and stuff like that we've been speaking about earlier, provided from external sources, but we must become the developers of those technologies. From our education system, primary to tertiary, we must enhance the use of digital technology with focus on all disciplines. Lastly, we must develop and use technology to fight crime and improve the life of our citizens. I know that might sound like a mouthful, Michelle, but it is a lot, but it is the minimum that we should strive for if we are going to become a digital region and transition to a digital society.
No, absolutely. I definitely agree. And the thing, though, that I find interesting is that it looks as if we may be getting to a point where critical mass is being developed. So here it is that at CANTO, you're going to have this discussion. You have CARICOM working on the single ICT space. You have CTU advocating 21st century government. And one of the things that they have been keen to focus on and help governments to really take on board is the fact that government services must be delivered more efficiently, more effectively, and often that requires that they be delivered online. So I'm optimistic that within the coming months, hopefully, but certainly in the not too distant future, that we can hopefully begin to see some real change where that is concerned, that we are moving more seriously towards a digital region.
Of course, I think it's exciting times. I think the need is there. I think governments are ready. Of course, industry is ready. The technology is there. And I think the region is ready to make a big leap. And I'm happy to be part of that transition and that transformation. I think all the stars are aligned, and it's now for us to use all these different platforms, all these different technologies to improve the life of our citizens. And if we have that one goal, then industry would do their part, regulations would do their part, governments and policymakers will do their part. And I think we will get there quickly.
I hope so. Teresa, thank you so much for coming on ICT Pulse podcast. I know that this week in particular has been you're quite stretched. There is ICT Week happening in Trinidad. There is a CTO, Commonwealth Telecommunications Union organization conference also happening. And I think there's something else that's also going on. So I know that, it has been difficult to sort of juggle all of those activities and commitments and to sit and talk with us for a moment.
It's my pleasure, Michelle, and thank you for your patience, and thank you for the work that you have been doing in ensuring that the public and the region knows what is going on, and also to do your part in the transition.
Thank you, and all the best. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for listening to the ICT Pulse podcast. You can find links to some of the things we talked about on our website, ict-pulse.com. If you like this episode, please show your support by leaving us a review on iTunes, as it will help others find the show. You can email us at info@ict-pulse.com or drop us a note on our Facebook page, facebook.com/ICT Pulse, or via Twitter @ICT Pulse. We hope you'll join us again for our next episode. Take care.